The massive crystal towers of the Galactic Council reached toward the stars, their surfaces gleaming like frozen lightning. Inside the great chamber, representatives from dozens of alien worlds sat in their floating seats, waiting for the ancient ceremony to begin. The air buzzed with quiet conversations in 100 different languages, all translated by the universal speakers built into every chair. Elder Nithara walked slowly to the center of the room. Her purple skin had grown pale with age, and her forearms shook slightly as she carried the weight of 700 years. She was the oldest living being in the known galaxy, the keeper of records who remembered things that others had forgotten. Her violet eyes, once bright as stars, now held the sadness of someone who had seen too much. The chatter died down as she reached the speaking platform. Every representative turned to look at her. Some showed respect, others barely hid their boredom. After all, what could this old creature possibly say that would matter to their modern, advanced civilizations? "My fellow beings," she began, her voice crackling through the speakers, "I come before you today with a warning that my people have carried for 3,000 years. There is a small planet in a system you call Sol 3. The primitive species there calls it Earth. These beings, these humans, must never be contacted. They must remain cut off from the rest of the galaxy forever." A few representatives shifted in their seats. Council leader Vexmore, whose lizard-like face was covered in golden scales, let out a small laugh. His people, the Drakmari, had built star-spanning empires when most species were still living in caves. To him, this warning sounded like the frightened mumblings of a very old, very confused elder. "Respected Nithara," he said, his voice smooth, but mocking, "you speak of creatures who only recently learned to make fire without rubbing sticks together. My scouts report they still fight wars with metal projectiles. Their fastest ships cannot even reach their own moon properly. What possible threat could such backward beings pose to civilizations that have mastered faster-than-light travel?" Several other representatives nodded in agreement. The Zenthari delegate, whose glass-like body reflected the chamber's lights, spoke up next. "Our historical records show no contact with this species. If they were truly dangerous, surely we would have some evidence of their capabilities." Nithara's 4 hands gripped the edges of the speaking platform. "That is exactly the point," she said, her voice growing stronger. "There are no records because my ancestors made sure of it. They sealed away everything about their encounters with humans. Every data crystal, every testimony, every warning was locked away in the deepest vaults of our homeworld." She reached into her robes and pulled out 3 small glowing crystals. Each one pulsed with an inner light that seemed to shift and change. "Colors? These are the only remaining records. My great-grandmother gave them to my grandmother gave them to my mother, and my mother passed them to me with a single instruction: never let the humans spread beyond their world." The chamber grew quiet. Even the skeptics could see that these crystals were ancient, their technology unlike anything used in modern times. But Vexmore was not impressed. He had built his career on expanding the Federation's influence, on bringing new species into their fold. The idea of avoiding contact with anyone went against everything he believed. "And what exactly do these sealed records say?" he asked, his tail swishing behind his chair. "That they breathe fire? That they can destroy planets with their thoughts? Please, enlightened elder, share these terrible secrets with us." Nithara closed her violet eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength from memories that were not her own. When she opened them again, they blazed with an intensity that made several representatives lean back in their seats. "They adapt," she said simply. "Not like other species adapt over millions of years. They adapt while you watch. Show them a weapon and they will build a better one before you finish demonstrating it. Put them in an impossible situation and they will find 3 different ways to not just survive but thrive. They do not accept that things cannot be changed. They do not understand the word impossible." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But most dangerous of all, they make others like them. Every species they encounter begins to think like humans. They spread their madness like a disease. They question everything. They change everything. They make the settled order of the galaxy into chaos." Representative Korth of the metallic hegemony laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "So they are curious and inventive. These sound like qualities we should welcome, not fear. You think so? Nithara asked, her voice now barely above a whisper. My ancestors thought the same thing. They sent diplomatic missions. They tried to guide these humans, to civilize them, to make them fit into our proper order. Do you know what happened to those missions? The chamber waited in silence. They came back changed. Our own people, beings who had followed the same traditions for thousands of years, suddenly began asking why things had to be done the old way. They started building new types of ships. They questioned the authority of their leaders. They began to think like humans. Vexmore stood up from his floating seat, his golden scales catching the light. Enough of these fairy tales, Elder. The Federation has protocols for dealing with primitive species. We guide them slowly into galactic society. We teach them our ways. We maintain order. Your fears are the product of an old mind that has lived too long and seen too much. He looked around the chamber at the other representatives. I call for a vote. All in favor of proceeding with standard first contact protocols for the humans of Sol 3. Hands, claws, and tentacles rose throughout the chamber. The vote was overwhelming. Only a few ancient species abstained, and none voted with Nithara. The motion passes, Vexmore announced with satisfaction. We will make contact with these humans within the next Galactic Standard Month. Ambassador Kilden will lead the first diplomatic mission. As the representatives began to file out of the chamber, chattering excitedly about this new species to add to their federation, Nithara remained at the speaking platform. She held the 3 ancient crystals close to her chest, feeling their warm pulse against her old heart. They will not listen, she whispered to herself. They never listen, and by the time they understand, it will be too late for all of us. The great chamber emptied, leaving the old keeper of records alone with her warnings and her fears. Outside the crystal towers, the galaxy continued its ancient ordered dance of civilizations that had remained unchanged for thousands of years, but not for much longer. The teleportation beam sparkled and hummed as Ambassador Kilden materialized on the bridge of the human starship. His tall, elegant form appeared in a shower of blue light, his ceremonial robes flowing around him like liquid silver. The fabric was woven with microscopic circuits that displayed shifting patterns of stars and galaxies, a clear demonstration of his civilization's advanced technology. Kilden looked around the bridge with barely concealed amusement. The human ship was so primitive, it was almost charming. Thick metal plates had been welded together in rough patches, exposed wires ran along the ceiling, and everything had the look of something built in a hurry by people who were making it up as they went along. To someone from a race that grew, their ships from living crystal, it looked like a child's toy made from scrap metal. 3 humans waited for him in the center of the bridge. Commander Minho stood at attention, his military uniform crisp despite the obvious wear at the edges. His dark eyes missed nothing, constantly scanning Kilden and his escort guards, calculating distances and angles like a man who had spent his life preparing for fights. There was something in his posture that spoke of recent battles, of a leader who had earned his rank through action rather than politics. Dr. Yunji stood slightly to his left, her scientist's coat spotted with burn marks and chemical stains. Her hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her eyes never stopped moving, analyzing everything from Kilden's robes to the energy readings coming from his guards' weapons. She held a small device in her hand, some kind of scanner that was quietly recording everything that happened. General Taewook completed the trio, his scarred hands clasped behind his back. His uniform bore the marks of someone who had seen real combat, with faded patches where insignia had been changed and small tears that had been carefully mended. One of his hands was missing 2 fingers, and burn scars ran up his left arm, disappearing under his sleeve. "Greetings, humans of Earth," Kilden announced, his voice flowing through the universal translator built into his collar. The device converted his melodic native language into the harsh, choppy sounds of human speech. "I am Ambassador Kilden of the Galactic Federation. We bring you tidings of great joy and opportunity." He gestured grandly, his robes swirling around him. "Your species has been observed and found to show remarkable promise. With proper guidance, you can take your place among the civilized worlds of the galaxy. We offer you membership in our great federation, where you will learn to live in harmony with thousands of other species." Commander Minho exchanged a quick glance with his companions. The look that passed between them was subtle, but meaningful, the kind of silent communication that comes from working together in dangerous situations. "That sounds very generous," Minho said carefully. "Could you explain what this guidance would involve? What exactly would membership in your federation mean for humanity?" Kyleton smiled, the expression meant to be reassuring, but coming across as slightly condescending. "Nothing too burdensome, I assure you. Standard protocols that all new species must follow. For your own protection, of course, your travel would be restricted to your home system until you have achieved the proper level of cultural development. We would establish resource quotas to ensure sustainable growth. Your people would attend cultural adaptation seminars to learn proper galactic etiquette and behavior." Dr. Yunji stepped forward, her voice carefully neutral. "These restrictions, how long would they last, and what happens if we feel they're no longer necessary?" "Oh, these things take time." Kyleton waved a dismissive hand. "Some species require centuries of guidance before they're ready for full independence. The Zephyrians took 400 years, and they were considered quite quick learners." General Taewok spoke up, his gruff voice cutting through the ambassador's smooth tones. "And if we decide we don't want this guidance? If humanity prefers to develop on its own terms?" For the first time, Kyleton's smile faltered. His expression hardened, and the friendly diplomat mask slipped away to reveal something much colder underneath. "I'm afraid that's not really an option," he said, his tone now carrying an edge of steel. "The galaxy has an established order, and that order must be maintained. Primitive species cannot be allowed to develop without proper supervision. The risks to galactic stability are simply too great." He made a subtle gesture with his left hand, and immediately his 4 escort guards stepped forward. Their weapons, sleek devices that looked more like works of art than instruments of war, began to glow with an ominous blue light. The humming sound they made filled the bridge, a low vibration that seemed to resonate in everyone's bones. The other humans on the bridge tensed, hands moving toward their own weapons, but Commander Minho held up a hand to stop them. What happened next surprised Kyleton more than anything he had experienced in his long diplomatic career. The humans didn't panic. They didn't beg or try to negotiate from a position of fear. Instead, they looked interested. General Taewok actually chuckled, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. "Now that's impressive technology," he said, nodding appreciatively at the glowing weapons. "Plasma-based energy discharge, I'm guessing. Very clean, very efficient. Must take tremendous power to maintain that level of coherent energy." Dr. Yunji was openly scanning the weapons with her device, her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. "The containment field alone must require processing power beyond anything we've developed. How do you prevent quantum cascade failure at those energy levels?" Commander Minho stepped forward, completely ignoring the fact that 4 alien weapons were pointed at his chest. "This is fascinating, Ambassador, but I think we need a moment to discuss your offer with our team. Would it be possible to have a brief recess, say an hour or two?" Something about their reaction made Kyleton deeply uncomfortable. In all his years of conducting first contact situations, he had never encountered a species that responded to superior firepower with scientific curiosity and polite requests for bathroom breaks. Usually there was fear, submission, maybe some desperate bargaining. But these humans acted like they were at a business meeting that had taken an interesting turn. "I suppose that would be acceptable," he said slowly. "But do not mistake our patience for weakness. The Federation's offer is generous, but it is not optional." "Of course," Commander Minho smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "We just want to make sure we fully understand all the implications. We'll be back shortly." As the humans filed out of the bridge, Kyleton noticed that several of them were quietly talking into small communication devices. Dr. Yunji was still scanning his guards' weapons, her device beeping softly as it recorded energy signatures and weapon configurations. What Kyleton didn't see was the message that Commander Minho sent to the engineering section as soon as he left the bridge. "Priority Alpha, full technical analysis. We need countermeasures and we need them fast. Down in engineering, a team of human technicians led by Chief Engineer Jong-soo were already at work. They had been monitoring the entire conversation, and Dr. Yunji's scans had given them detailed readings of the alien weapons. What would have taken other species years to understand, the humans began figuring out in minutes. "Look at this energy signature," Jong-soo said, pointing at the scrolling data on his screen. "It's actually not that. Different from our experimental plasma rifles. More sophisticated, sure, but the basic principles are the same." His assistant, Technician Hae-won, was already sketching modifications on a tablet. "If we reverse the polarity on our shield generators and boost the power output, we might be able to create an interference field. Won't stop the weapons completely, but it could disrupt their targeting systems." Back on the bridge, Kyldon waited with growing unease. Something about this entire situation felt wrong. The humans were taking too long, and their reaction had been all wrong. In his experience, primitive species either submitted immediately or fought desperately. They didn't ask technical questions about the weapons being pointed at them. When the humans returned exactly 1 hour later, they seemed different somehow. More confident, more prepared. Commander Minho walked with the stride of someone who had just received very good news. "Ambassador," he said politely, "we've considered your generous offer, and we have some questions about the details." But Kyldon was no longer paying attention to the words. He was watching the human's eyes, and what he saw there made his blood run cold. These weren't the eyes of primitives cowering before superior technology. These were the eyes of predators who had just figured out how to hunt. The massive holographic display in the Federation Command Center stretched from floor to ceiling, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of blue dots represented Federation worlds connected by the safe, established hyperspace routes that had been used for centuries. But now, scattered across the map like drops of blood, 17 red markers pulsed ominously in places where no one should have been able to go. Admiral Korthek stood before the display, his 6 arms crossed in frustration, his insect-like eyes reflecting the red glow of the impossible markers. His species, the Mandari, had been the Federation's military backbone for over 1,000 years. They were methodical, precise, and utterly predictable, which was exactly why the chaos spreading across his tactical display made his compound eyes twitch with anger. "Explain this to me again," he clicked, his translator converting his chittering language into galactic standard. 3 months ago, these humans were trapped in their single system. Now they're scattered across 17 different sectors. How is this possible? Intelligence Officer Zekhan, a nervous creature whose blue skin was currently flushed purple, with anxiety, manipulated the display with trembling tentacles. "Sir, we've analyzed the energy signatures from their ships. They've somehow modified our own transportation technology. The humans reverse-engineered our hyperspace drives from Ambassador Kyldon's escort vessels." "That's impossible," Korthek snapped. "Our hyperspace technology took the Zenthari Empire 3,000 years to develop. Even with detailed blueprints, it should take centuries for a primitive species to understand the basic principles." "Yes, sir, that's what our scientists said too, but the evidence is right there." Zekhan pointed to a series of energy readings scrolling down the side of the display. "These are hyperspace exit signatures from human ships. They're using our technology, but they've modified it in ways we didn't think were possible." The display zoomed in on one of the red markers, showing a small planet orbiting a violent orange star. "This is Kepler 442b in the Typhoon sector. We classified it as uninhabitable due to constant electromagnetic storms that destroy any electronic equipment within hours. But somehow, Captain Jin Woo of the Human Exploration Corps has established a permanent colony there." Korthek's mandibles clicked in disbelief. The hegemony lost 3 survey ships trying to land on that world. How are primitive humans surviving where our most advanced technology failed? "Our spy satellites picked up these images before the storms destroyed them." Zekhan displayed a series of grainy photographs. They showed human structures built low to the ground, with strange metallic mesh covering everything like protective nets. They're using the storms themselves as a power source. Somehow they've turned the planet's main danger into their greatest advantage. The Admiral's compound eyes focused on another red marker. What about this one in the Vega trade sector? That's complicated, sir. Zekhan's skin turned an even deeper shade of purple. A human trader named So Young has been operating in the Vega markets for 6 weeks. She's somehow managing to outperform guild veterans who have been trading those routes for decades. How? The Mercantile Guild controls every aspect of trade in that sector. Their pricing algorithms are based on centuries of data. She's not playing by their rules, sir. Instead of following established trade routes, she's creating new ones. She's found shortcuts through sectors we considered too dangerous to navigate. Her profit margins are 3 times higher than anyone else's because she's buying goods from sources no one else knew existed. Korthek turned to stare at the tactical display again. Each red marker represented something that shouldn't be possible. Show me the worst one. Zekhan's tentacles trembled as he manipulated the controls. The display shifted to show a region of space marked with warning symbols and quarantine beacons. The Void Sector, sir. It's been off-limits for 2000s. Years after the hegemony lost an entire research fleet there. Space-time is unstable, hyperspace travel is impossible, and anything that goes in never comes back. And Commander Heejin's exploration vessel went in 3 weeks ago. She came back yesterday. The silence in the command center was deafening. Every officer and technician stopped what they were doing to stare at the display. The Void Sector had been considered a death trap for millennia. Entire civilizations had written it off as impassable. What did she find? Korthek asked quietly. Data that changes everything we thought we knew about faster than light travel. Zekhan's voice was barely above a whisper. The space-time distortions that make the sector so dangerous. She figured out how to use them as natural hyperspace accelerators. Her ship can now travel at speeds that shouldn't be theoretically possible. Admiral Korthek felt something he had never experienced in his centuries of military service. Genuine fear. Not fear of an enemy's weapons or tactics, but fear of the unknown, of forces beyond his understanding. The reports kept coming in, each one more impossible than the last. Engineer Dongmin had somehow convinced the oppressed Helix miners to share their deepest secrets with him. The Helix had been the Federation's primary source of rare minerals for centuries, their people kept in line through careful control of mining technology. But now their output had tripled and they were using techniques that Federation scientists claimed were impossible. How did he do it? Korthek demanded. He talked to them, sir. Actually listened to their ideas. The Helix miners had been trying to improve their techniques for generations, but the Federation always rejected their suggestions as primitive. Dongmin took their ideas seriously and helped them build better equipment. Their suggestions worked, better than our best scientists predicted. The Helix are now extracting minerals from deposits we thought were exhausted, using methods that are somehow both simpler and more effective than our standard procedures. But the most disturbing report came from the Outer Rim. A human merchant. A vessel had encountered a Federation patrol ship that was attacking a refugee convoy. Instead of fleeing or trying to negotiate, the human captain had broadcast the incident across subspace channels, complete with video evidence of Federation forces firing on unarmed civilians. The footage is spreading across the communication networks faster than we can shut it down, Zekhan reported. 17 different species have seen it. They're asking questions about Federation policies that we've never had to answer before. On E, her remote observatory at the edge of known space, Elder Nithara watched the chaos unfold through her ancient monitoring equipment. The crystalline towers of her homeworld had been abandoned decades ago, but she had remained, keeping her eternal vigil, watching for the signs her ancestors had warned about. The sealed data crystals pulsed with warm light beside her, their ancient, warnings now seeming prophetic rather than paranoid. She had studied the patterns for centuries, understanding what others refused to see. They spread like fire, she murmured to herself, watching the red markers multiply on her own display. Not conquest, transformation. They don't destroy the old ways. They make others want to change them. Each human ship that ventured into Federation space carried something more dangerous than weapons, ideas. The idea that the impossible might just be difficult. The idea that talking to people might work better than controlling them. The idea that the way things had always been done might not be the best way. Her violet eyes tracked the spreading chaos. As more reports flooded in, a human doctor named Kyung-ho had cured a plague on Rigel 7 using methods that Federation medicine had dismissed as primitive. A human artist called Min Jung had created sculptures that somehow made people question the rigid caste systems they had accepted for millennia. Most dangerous of all, humans seemed to have an infectious curiosity. Every species they encountered began asking the same questions. Why do we do things this way? What if there's a better way? What if the people in charge are wrong? Nithara looked at her reflection in the dark crystal surface of her monitoring station. Her ancient face showed centuries of worry, but now there was something else there too. A strange mixture of terror and anticipation. "They've awakened," she whispered to the empty chamber, her words echoing off the crystal walls. "Just as the prophecies said they would. The galaxy will never be the same." Outside her observatory, the first human exploration ships were already probing deeper into unknown space, carrying their dangerous cargo of questions and possibilities to worlds that had never imagined change was possible. The age of stability was ending. The age of chaos had begun. The darkness of space around Earth's moon had never seen anything like it. 12 different alien fleets hung in perfect formation, their massive ships blotting out entire sections of stars. The Federation had called upon every major civilization in the galaxy for this operation. Mandari dreadnoughts, each one the size of a small city, floated alongside elegant Zenthari crystal ships that gleamed like frozen lightning. The insectoid hegemony had brought their hive mind-controlled swarms, while the ancient Drakmari contributed their planet-cracker battleships that had ended wars across a dozen star systems. Admiral Korthek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Order, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. 3,000 ships strong, representing the combined military might of civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Surely this would be enough to end the human problem once and for all. On the other side of the battle line, the human defense fleet looked like a collection of scrap metal, held together by hope and stubbornness. Captain Jae-hyun's flagship, the Defiant Spirit, was a patchwork of welded plates, exposed wiring, and jury-rigged systems that no self-respecting engineer would admit to building. The entire human fleet numbered barely 60 ships, many of them converted civilian vessels with weapons bolted onto their hulls like afterthoughts. Jae-hyun stood in his cramped command center, studying the overwhelming odds displayed on screens that flickered with electrical problems. His crew worked around him with quiet efficiency, their faces showing the kind of calm determination that comes from knowing you're probably going to die, but deciding to make it count. "All ships, this is Defiant Spirit," Jae-hyun spoke into his communicator, his voice steady despite the impossible situation. "You all know why we're here. The Federation wants to put humanity in a cage, to control how we grow and what we become. We've seen what that means for other species, centuries of stagnation, of being told what's impossible, of never reaching their true potential." He paused, looking out at the massive alien fleet that could probably destroy Earth's moon if they wanted to. "Today we show them what humans really are. Remember the plan, adapt and overcome, use everything, waste nothing, and never, ever give up." The battle began exactly as Admiral Korthek expected. His ships opened fire with coordinated precision, their advanced targeting systems locking onto the primitive human vessels with devastating accuracy. Plasma beams and particle cannons lit up the void, striking human ships that exploded in brilliant flashes of light and debris. Within the first 10 minutes, 20 human ships had been destroyed, their shields cobbled together from salvaged. Alien technology couldn't stand up to the concentrated firepower of the Federation fleet. Their weapons, primitive projectile and missile systems, barely scratched the armor of the alien dreadnoughts. As expected, Korthek clicked to his staff officers. "Primitive technology cannot stand against superior force. This will be over within the hour." But then something started to happen that made his compound eyes narrow with confusion. The surviving. Human ships weren't retreating or trying to escape. Instead, they were moving closer to the wreckage of their destroyed vessels, using their crude grappling systems to pull in chunks of debris. "What are they doing?" asked his tactical officer. The answer became clear as they watched. Human engineering. Crews were working in open space, wearing nothing but basic pressure suits, welding pieces of their destroyed ships onto the hulls of the survivors. They were cannibalizing their own wrecks, turning the remains of fallen vessels into additional armor and weapons platforms for the ships that were still fighting. Lieutenant Su Jin's corvette, the Dancing Comet, had taken a direct hit that killed her engines and left her drifting helplessly. But instead of abandoning ship, she and her crew did something that no Federation tactician had ever planned for. They manually steered their dead ship using attitude thrusters, aiming it directly at the hangar bay of the Mandaree flagship Supreme. "Authority, what is that ship doing?" Admiral Korthek demanded as he watched the tiny human vessel approach his allies' massive dreadnought. The answer came in a flash of light that temporarily blinded every sensor in the battle zone. Lieutenant Su Jin had overloaded her ship's reactor core and detonated it inside the Supreme Authority's hangar bay. The explosion tore through the massive ship's interior, crippling its weapon systems and sending it spinning out of control. "Commander, Wu Bin's destroyer, the Iron Storm, had lost half its hull to enemy fire, but instead of trying to repair the damage, he did something even more shocking. He aimed his crippled ship at a formation of Zenthari cruisers and engaged his remaining engines at full power, turning his vessel into a guided missile traveling at tremendous speed. The Zenthari ships tried to destroy the approaching wreck with their defensive weapons, but Commander Wu Bin had covered his ship's hull with reflective panels salvaged from destroyed Federation vessels. Their own weapons fire bounced off the improvised armor, and the Iron Storm smashed through their formation like a cannonball through glass sculptures. But the most terrifying sight was Captain Hyun Soo's heavy cruiser, the Relentless Pioneer. His ship had been badly damaged early in the battle, but instead of withdrawing for repairs, his crew had done something that violated every principle of engineering safety. They had ripped the plasma weapons off a destroyed Drakmari ship and somehow attached them to their own hull, using nothing but welding torches and determination. The result was a mechanical nightmare that should have exploded the moment they tried to fire it. Alien weapons technology mixed with human systems in ways that no designer had ever intended. Power cables ran outside the hull. Weapon mounts were held in place with metal brackets that looked like they belonged on a construction site, and the entire setup glowed with dangerous energy discharges. "That's impossible," breathed Admiral Korthek's chief engineer. "Those weapon systems aren't compatible with their power grid. The energy feedback should destroy their ship." But when Captain Hyun Soo fired his jury-rigged weapons, they worked. Not only did they worked better than they should have. The human modifications had somehow improved the plasma weapons' efficiency, making them hit harder and recharge faster than the original Drakmari versions. Across the battlefield, similar scenes of impossible engineering were taking place. Human ships were incorporating alien technology in real time, modifying enemy weapons to work with their own systems, using debris as both armor and raw materials for new weapons. They were evolving during the battle itself, becoming more dangerous with each passing minute. A hegemony swarm ship found itself being boarded by humans who had somehow turned their escape pods into boarding craft. The insectoid crew, bred for hive mind coordination, couldn't adapt to the chaotic human tactics of individual initiative and creative problem-solving. Our Zenthari crystal ship discovered that its elegant energy shields were useless against human missile attacks that were actually cargo containers filled with scrap metal and explosives launched from improvised catapults. As Admiral Korthek watched his carefully planned battle dissolve into chaos, he began to understand what Elder Nithara had tried to warn them about. The humans weren't just fighting with inferior technology, they were transforming that technology in ways that shouldn't be possible, finding solutions that no computer could calculate. "Sir," his tactical officer's voice was tight with panic, "we're losing ships faster than we're destroying theirs. Their effectiveness is increasing exponentially." The Admiral looked at his displays in growing horror. What had started as a simple extermination had become something else entirely. The humans weren't just adapting to their weapons and tactics. They were learning from every attack, improving their defenses, and finding new ways to turn the Federation's own technology against them. All ships, he clicked into his communicator, withdraw to minimum safe distance, regroup for analysis. As the Federation fleet pulled back, leaving the field to the battered but victorious human ships, Admiral Korthek realized the terrible truth that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The humans hadn't just survived an impossible battle. They had grown stronger during it, evolving in real time into something more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever seen, and now they knew they could win. Part 5. Too late, Elder Nithara moved slowly through the long hallways of what used to be the most important building in the galaxy, the Galactic Council chambers. Everything looked different now. The humans had changed almost everything they could see, but not in a bad way. They had made the old building work better, feel more alive and actually useful for the first time in thousands of years. The ancient stone walls still stood strong, but now they had new technology built into them. Bright lights replaced the dim torches that had burned for centuries. The air felt fresh and clean instead of stuffy and old. Small gardens grew in corners where nothing had lived before. The humans had a gift for taking old, tired things and making them young again. What surprised Nithara most was how the humans had not destroyed the old ways through war or force. Instead, they had simply offered better ideas, and slowly, one by one, the other species had chosen to follow them. The old system had not been conquered. It had simply become useless, like an old tool that no one wanted to use anymore. President Jin A, a calm woman with kind eyes, now sat in the great chamber where the Council of Elders used to make their slow, careful decisions. But instead of the endless debates that used to go on for months about simple problems, Ginny would listen to both sides of any argument and then suggest solutions that seemed obvious once she said them. She used human ideas about what was fair and right, concepts that had never existed in galactic lore before. The strangest part was how well these human ideas worked for alien minds. Species that had fought each other for thousands of years were now working together to solve their problems. Trade disputes that had caused wars were settled in days instead of decades. Old enemies were becoming friends, all because someone finally asked the simple question, what would be fair for everyone? In the great library, which had once been a quiet, dusty place where only the most important scholars were allowed, Ambassador Yu Jin worked side by side with researchers from dozens of different worlds. The library buzzed with activity now. Humans shared their knowledge freely, asking for nothing in return except the chance to learn from others. Together, these mixed teams of human and alien minds were creating new technologies and solving problems that had puzzled civilizations for ages. The humans brought fresh ways of thinking, while the aliens shared wisdom gathered over millions of years. Neither group could have achieved these breakthroughs alone, but together they were changing the galaxy in ways no one had imagined possible. The strict social rules that had controlled galactic civilization for so long were breaking down everywhere. The old system had put every person and every species in a specific place, with clear rules about who was more important than whom, but the humans treated everyone as equals, and this idea was spreading like wildfire through the galaxy. Young people from different species were working together on projects their elders would never have allowed. Artists were creating new forms of beauty by mixing human and alien styles. Scientists were making discoveries by combining different ways of understanding the universe. Even the oldest, most traditional societies were starting to change as their young people brought home new ideas about freedom and equality. Nithara stopped walking when she reached a large window that looked out onto a garden courtyard. What she saw there made her understand everything in a new way. Children from many different species were playing together, human children like Sun Wu and Mi Young running and laughing, alongside young aliens whose parents had once been enemies of Earth. The sound of their laughter filled the courtyard and echoed through the halls that had once been silent, except for the serious voices of ancient ceremonies. These children spoke each other's languages, shared each other's games, and clearly saw no differences between themselves, except interesting variations that made play more fun. Watching them, Nithara finally understood what her people had really been afraid of all along. Her ancestors had spent so much time worrying about human weapons and human armies that they had missed the real threat. Humans did not destroy the things they encountered. They transformed them. They took old ideas and made them new, took broken systems and fixed them, took enemies and turned them into friends. The old galactic civilization was disappearing, but not through violence or conquest. It was changing into something better, something more alive and hopeful than anything that had existed before. And now, seeing those children play together under the alien suns, Nithara realized that trying to stop this transformation had always been impossible. The humans were not just another species. They were a force of change itself, and change, once started, could never be stopped.